Afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's get cracking with today's topic, moving from support to a service-based PMO. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And that necessarily means we're going to be looking at what is a support versus as opposed to a service-based PMO. And we're going to explore this topic. If I can just get my screens to do what I need them to do, we will anyway. Bear with me. Apologies, one moment. It's all very well you being able to see my screen. It doesn't help if I can't. Um, there we go. Right. So yes, we're talking today about moving from support to a service-based PMO. Just before we get going, that just to let you know who I am. My name is Jeremy Nichols. Um, I am an associate trainer for PMO learning. So I train their essentials for PMO administrators and essentials for PMO analysts course. And I also am a PMO manager of old. I knew, in fact, I run PMOs still. I've run a number of PMOs of different sizes, from small to large. The largest one, perhaps I ran a few years ago, had 150 projects on a £70 million annual budget, which was quite exciting. But also the very small PMOs. I've got some experience in setting up PMOs, which I find quite interesting, thinking about how we're going to do it, how we're going to deliver what we want to deliver as a PMO. And as you'll see, that's going to be quite relevant today. So as I say, I train for PMO learning, but also for my own organisation, the Everyday Project Manager, where we offer practical project management training, but we also offer PMO as a service. So service-based PMOs are of very real interest to me. But today's session is very much based on some of the stuff we teach and cover in the Essentials for PMO Administrators and Essentials for PMO Analysts course. These are the two courses that we offer through PMO Learning. So in true Sesame Street style, today's show is brought to you by those two courses. And we're going to be focusing in on that part of the course that looks on support versus service-based PMOs and what the difference between those two is, what their various advantages and disadvantages are, and how you might move from one to the other. So looking at today's menu, and you'll see why today's menu is going to be quite relevant as we go through this today, we're going to look at support versus service, the different types of PMO that they are, and their different characteristics. We're going to then look at the service catalogue, which is kind of a key document when it comes to creating your service-based PMO. So we're going to look at that, how we define and curate our service offering through the service catalogue. Then I'd like to explore how you might make the transition if you were thinking of moving from a more support-based PMO to a service-based PMO, how you might approach that transition, things to think about when you're moving from support to service. And we're going to round off today by looking at some of the support that's available to you if you are considering making this transition, some things you might like to think about, some tools, some resources that are available to you. And at the end, we'll obviously leave space for any questions, but do feel free, if you've got questions, chuck them in the chat as we go through. And also, it'd be lovely if you could share your own thoughts, experiences on this for the benefit of everyone on the call. This is, obviously I'm going to give you my view on these things, and it's obviously very much informed by the Essentials for PMO courses. But you will have some experience. I'm sure some of the people on this course, on this webinar, sorry, today will have experience of perhaps support-based PMOs or trying to get to a service-based PMO. Perhaps you run a service-based PMO. Tell me how that's gone for you and what it was like for you making that transition. So that's what we're going to cover today. The reason I wanted to talk about this is obviously in order to train the Essentials for PMO Administrators and PMO Analysts courses, I also had to do them. So I went on these courses a little while back in order to become an accredited trainer. And this was one of those moments on that course, and it just goes to show you're never too old to learn, doesn't it? That was a real light bulb moment for me, despite having run PMOs, even very large PMOs, and a number of them for a number of years. There was this switch that went on when this topic was broached, and I suddenly sort of thought that actually there are these two different types, and thinking about them in this way I found really helpful, and it made me think about how I wanted to shape any future PMOs, and indeed the one I was working on at that time. It was, as I say, a real light bulb for me. And so it's a real bit of the course that I enjoy teaching. I think it's a really nice concept, and I think it's one of the more helpful ones in terms of shaping and maturing your PMO. And that's why I wanted to talk about it particularly today. But we're going to start all of this at the crux of it all today. I'm going to start with a tale of two kitchens, because this is what it's all going to come down to, as an analogy between two kitchens. Because the two different types of PMO, your support-based PMO and your service-based PMO, can be thought of very much like two different types of kitchen. And I think the analogy is people who've been on my courses before know I love to stretch and torture an analogy. But this one actually does suffer quite a bit of stretching and quite a bit of twisting and turning. There's lots of links between these two ideas, the idea of the different types of kitchen and how they might apply to your PMO. So we're going to look at the two different types of kitchen and think about how they're set up, and then we're going to take that analogy and apply it to PMOs. We'll do the same for the two different types of PMO. So the first kitchen I want you to consider is the home kitchen. So your kitchen at home, and that's this is going to be our analog for the support-based PMO. So your home-based kitchen, this is obviously a picture taken in my kitchen just last night, and the home-based kitchen is there's certain characteristics to it. The orders are different every day, so we sort of manage according to what the demand is, what people want. But people will come, the kids will run into the kitchen and say, we want burgers for dinner, we want spaghetti, we want lasagna. They'll come in and we'll have a look and think about what we can cook each day. We're not working to a set menu of any sort. We just think about what can we cook today based on the ingredients we've got. So we have a look in the larder, and each night we're going to rustle something up based on what's in the larder. So we look at the ingredients we've got, we think about the tools that we've got to hand as well, and we use whatever tools we have in hand to make whatever it is that we want to cook up this evening. So we have people come in, the demands are different each day, the orders are different each day, what people want, and we look at what we've got and we try and respond to that demand, respond to those orders with whatever we've got in the kitchen. So we use whatever tools are on hand. We don't necessarily have specialist kit. We might have the odd specialist bit of kit, but generally, the stuff in the home kitchen is fairly standard. It's not particularly specialised, but we'll use what we've got to make the thing we're trying to make on any given day. Um, And finally, we'll give most things a go, but we also know our limitations. We know that there are certain things that if my wife comes into the kitchen this evening and asks for lobster thermidor, I mean, I'll give it a go. The chances are I'll really foul it up. But we'll give it a go. But sometimes we'll say, actually, that's not something I can do right now, or I'm going to need to go on a course before I can cook you, a cordon bleu recipe. So we respond to the different orders that come in every day. We rustle things based up on the tools that are available, the knowledge that we have. We'll sort of have a look at what we've got and go, well, actually, I can probably meet that request. I can meet that demand with some of this stuff if I do it in this way, and we'll use the tools to make that happen. And we'll give most things a go, but we know our limitations. So yeah, we sort of bend things to our will and make it work, but we get food on the table all the time, and every night, in the home kitchen, everyone gets fed, all things being equal. Occasion will burn the toast, but most evenings people get fed, and it's all good. So that's your home kitchen. Now, contrast that, if you will, with the professional kitchen. Now, ultimately, they're trying to do the same thing, which is feed people, right? But the characteristics are entirely different. In the professional kitchen, rather than just responding to those different orders that come in, there's a defined menu. You don't go into a restaurant and say, here's what I feel like today. You are presented with a bill of fare, and that's what you've got to choose from. So there's a defined menu, and we'll only cook in that kitchen, we'll only cook what's on the menu. I mean, obviously we can consider accommodating special requests. If we can do it occasionally, we'll go, all right, well, we can bend to that. And perhaps in our restaurant, if we get things that come in and frequently, so let's say we're an Italian restaurant and we don't have carbonara on the menu and we're getting these regular requests for carbonara, maybe we'll go, yeah, well, actually that fits with our offering. We'll have a look at bringing that onto the menu in the future. But if someone comes in, if we're an Italian restaurant and people are regularly, coming in and asking for Thai meals, we're probably going to say, no, look, we just don't do that. We're an Italian restaurant. It doesn't align with our strategy of being an Italian restaurant. So we'll only cook what's on the menu, but we'll consider special requests. And if we get lots of requests over time, we might consider adding that to the menu if it aligns with our overall what we're trying to achieve as a restaurant. So we only cook what's on the menu, but we might accommodate the odd thing. And in a professional kitchen, obviously all the tools are designed to craft the dishes that we've got on our menu. So we don't have anything extraneous. The tools we've got are the things that we need to do the job. And if there's a particularly specialist tool that we need to deliver that particular meal, then we'll go out and we'll buy that specialist tool and we'll use it and we'll have it available to us in the kitchen. And as I say, from time to time, we might revise the menu periodically in order to provide our customers with what they're asking for. So there is this, it doesn't mean that the menu is completely fixed forever, but we will sort of think about the demand we're getting. We won't necessarily respond to it immediately, but we might go, well, look, it's been 6 months and a lot of these requests have come in. Maybe this is something we should stick on the menu. So those are two types of kitchen. And obviously the thinly veiled analogy, which may now be very apparent to a number of you, is between how we provide services as a PMO. And just like the home kitchen, you might be working in a support-based PMO. Now, just to be clear, there is absolutely nothing wrong with a support-based PMO. Very often, that's what's desired. In the same way as there's nothing wrong with a home kitchen. That's what you need. You don't want a sort of professional stainless steel kitchen necessarily in your house, particularly if you're not just trying to knock up a sandwich every evening. That's not what it's about. So in certain circumstances, you don't actually want a professional kitchen. It's far more appropriate to have the home kitchen. And so I want to be clear, as we talk today about moving to a service-based PMO, I don't want to imply by that that it's somehow better or worse. It's actually not. But as kitchens mature, as they professionalise, they're going to go to a more professional kitchen module. And as you work in more mature delivery organisations, so too might you move towards a more service-based PMO. But that's not to suggest that there's anything wrong whatsoever with a support-based PMO. And sometimes it's not just okay to be in a support, it's actively desirable to have a support-based PMO rather than a service-based PMO. But if you're working in a support-based PMO, just as we've looked at sort of some of the characteristics of that home kitchen, what might a support-based PMO look like? What are some of the characteristics of that support-based PMO? Well, we usually resource limited. We usually work, and this is particularly prevalent in your PMOs of 1 and PMOs of 2. As we refer to them on the course, the poos and pots, the PMOs of 1 and the PMOs of 2. Those small resource limited PMOs where you've got a broad mix of skills, so the people working within it do a bit of everything. Jacks of all trades who will absolutely be able to turn their hands to most demands that come into the PMO. And as you can see from a support-based sort of offering, that's kind of necessary. We need people who are going to be multi-skilled, who are going to be able to turn their hands to everything. So they've got a broad mix of skills. The services we offer within that support-based PMO are going to vary as well from project to project. So we're not just going to say these are the services we provide. We'll work based according to work on what the project is. So again, this is probably when you're aligned to a project or a program, but it might even be within a portfolio management office providing services into projects. But as each product comes in and asks for support from the PMO, we'll tailor that support to that project. So the services will vary from project to project. What that means is we're quite likely to have a short-term roadmap. Because we are very much a responsive PMO. We're responding to the services that are coming in. And because we're offering different services all the time, it's very difficult to know, what are the services you're going to be providing a year from now. We might know what are the services that we're going to be delivering to our project managers and program managers over the next sort of month or two. But a long-term roadmap is kind of you know, out of out of the question, because we're just responding to things as they come in. We're just responding to the turns in the road rather than thinking about the long term destination. And again, that's fine. Very often, having that responsive PMO is entirely desirable, but it does mean that if you're trying to think about where the PMO is going strategically, that's very difficult to do in a support-based situation. And it also means if we're providing different services from project to project to project, and we're generally tailoring it to those projects and programs, it's very difficult to produce standard metrics. If I provide this service to project A and then tailor it to do it slightly differently for project B, and then a completely different service again that incorporates some of that service to project C, how are we going to know whether the service we're providing is equivalent across the different projects that we're providing service to? So it's quite difficult within a support-based PMO to produce any kind of standardized metrics to be able to think about how well the service we've been delivered is being received, because we're just pretty much by definition just providing it to that given project or program. We've not got this comparison across projects within the portfolio. So it can be very difficult to produce standard metrics, and that sort of it links to that short-term roadmap, and it all comes from the fact that we're responding to demand the whole time within a support-based PMO. So that's your support-based PMO. And again, you can see hopefully that analogy between that home kitchen. Again, lovely thing to have. People come to you, you respond to them, and you send them away with full tummies and big smiles. That's great, and it's a really good place to be. However, you may want to start thinking about moving to, is a service-based PMO more appropriate in my organization? Are we at the point on our maturity journey where we start thinking about flipping this on the head, and rather than working in the home kitchen kind of way, actually professionalizing the kitchen a bit and thinking about how we could actually make this a more mature delivery organization, in the same sense as if you were to use sort of corporate language. Professional kitchens have a more mature delivery process than do the home kitchens. So the service-based PMO, let's look at some of the characteristics of that and contrast this with the home-based PMO, support-based PMO. So whereas the support-based PMO was responding, it was usually resource limited, those PMOs of one and PMOs of two. Your service-based PMO is usually right-sized, and we've got the right size to deliver the agreed number of services. So we decide what the services are that we're going to provide, and we scale the PMO accordingly. So they're not resource limited. We have the right number of resources available to us, and we scale the PMO according to the services that we want to provide. Within that, in order to do that, we've still got a broad mix of skills. We're still dealing with PMO professionals, so we've still got this broad mix of skills, but those skills are somewhat aligned to the services we're providing. So we might have a risk specialist, perhaps, if there's a risk management type service that we want to provide. So we'll bring in skills as well, and when we're recruiting, we might recruit skill sets according to the kind of services we want to provide or are providing. So we have a broad mix of skills. Most people will be able to turn their hands to most things, but we also have skills that are aligned to the services that we provide. Perhaps we've got a particularly good finance person, perhaps someone who's come across from a PMO admin who's come across from a finance admin position to bring that finance know-how and really help us develop that service. That's as we learn on the course, one of the benefits of PMO administrator is that you can bring some of those skills and some of those competencies from any other part of the business. So we can use that to build skills and knowledge within the PMO as well. And the key thing is we have a defined set of services available. So rather than having those services vary from project to project, don't forget the support-based PMO still is providing a service, but rather than those services varying from project to project, what we have is a defined set of services in very much the same way that a professional restaurant has a defined menu, and you can order off that. So as a service-based PMO, we'll work out what the services are we want to provide. And this is one of the key concepts. And I say that light bulb moment for me, that I can move from just responding to demand to actually going, actually, what are the services I'm going to push out there? What are the things you can ask of me? And what are the things actually you can't? I don't, that's out of scope for the PMO that we've created. So you have a defined set of services available. Think of this as your menu. Um, and the menu is what we refer to as the service catalogue. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the service catalogue on the next slide. But I want you to get in your minds that concept that you have this, your restaurant menu is your PMO service catalogue. If you have a defined set of services, what you're able then to do is start thinking more about a roadmap. So whereas in the support-based PMO, you are only going to have a very short-term roadmap if you've got any roadmap at all, if we're doing a service-based approach, we can think about how we're going to develop that menu over the next year. These are the services we provide today, but what are the services we want to provide over the next 12, 18 months, 2 years, 5 years? Where do we want to be in time? And you can start to think of a roadmap. And of course, that roadmap is more than likely, or really should be, aligned to your organizational strategy. What's the direction this organization is going in? And not just the wider organization, but perhaps even just the P3M, the project delivery organization. How are we doing things differently? What sort of projects are we taking on? Are we perhaps moving in a more agile direction? Do we want to look at more sorts of services that support agile? Or are we, looking to get better in certain areas? So maybe we want to offer services that support those areas where we as an organisation want to improve. Perhaps we've recognised a particular weakness for financial reporting. So maybe the services we want to deliver 12 months from now support this improvement in financial reporting. But what we are able to do, if we've got a defined set of services, is then start to think about an as is and a to be. We've got, this is what we provide today, and what are the things we want to do in the future? What does our roadmap look like? And that includes not just additional services you might like to offer and scaling the PMO, but what are the things actually that we might retire? We've run that service for ages now. It's no longer really needed. Or perhaps we're going to outsource that to allow us to focus on more interesting things. So you might think about that in your roadmap as well. But you're able, the exciting thing at this point is you're able to have a roadmap and start thinking about how we grow and expand the PMO, or even if it's not growing and expanding, just tailoring it to absolutely meet the needs of your organisation. And that's really exciting. And the final part of this is, whereas in a support-based PMO, it's very difficult to get those metrics between on the service to understand if this service is delivering really well, because you can't really compare project to project because you're tailoring the service, or it's just a slightly different flavour of service that you're offering project to project. If you're in a service-based PMO, you can define the effort that's required to deliver the service and the value metrics associated with it. So you can actually figure out how well are we providing this service. In the same way, again, you can't judge whether last night's lasagna compares well with today's spaghetti, compares well with tomorrow's cheese and ham toasty in a home kitchen. But if I'm producing the same dish every night and thinking about how it's composed in the same way as a professional chef will be able to look at the food on the pass and go, yes, that meets the quality standard I expect. We can do that. We can start to determine what are the metrics we want to achieve. So we can have things like service level agreements, SLAs, to decide whether the service is performing as it should, what tweaks we might like to make to it, what training perhaps is required. So it's a really, really great way of having this continuous improvement to the service by defining the effort and the ongoing value metrics. But as I say, you're going to share all of this in the service catalogue. I'm going to take a brief pause for a breath for one and a quick sip of water. But Jennifer, can I ask, is there anything on the chat there that you want to highlight, or shall I plough on?
Dara's just put in a question.
Hmm.
One second. It's not buffering for myself, Dara. I don't know if anyone else is experiencing it. But Dara's kind of put their kind of PMO service. They have a set number of PMO staff who are paid for by corporate services, even though the work they do is across the trust. And they're a support-based PMO with a set number of resources.
Okay. That's interesting. So yeah, so
Mm.
again, absolute example of that playing out. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Um, and yeah, and a slightly different flavour of it again, which is always interesting to hear. Um, that's great. Right, so I'll move on and talk a little bit about the service catalogue and what that might look like. So as I say, we're thinking of the service catalogue as our menu. So within your service catalogue, this is your menu. What do we want to include in the service catalogue? What should be on the menu? What are the things we want to be calling out? It's worth saying, as I have done previously, even if you're working in a support-based PMO, it's still useful to think about what the services are you're providing and how you're providing them. Is there a way we can find consistency? We're doing a bit of risk management on that project and a bit of risk management on that project. Can we make that more consistent? How are we delivering that? So even if you're in a support-based PMO, a lot of this stuff can still apply. You might not turn back to your customers and go, look, this is the menu, and you can order off here and nothing else. But you might still have a service catalogue where you think about what are the services we provide, even if it's an internal one, and how can we improve them, measure the value of them, get that consistency. It might be a sort of way you start to think about moving to a service-based model. Um, so I'm going to talk briefly through these headings. These are sort of the headings you might have on any service catalogue entry. And then we're going to look at a worked example. So the service I've picked on is you could be working in a PMO in an agile environment. And one of the things you might do on the supporting that product ownership sort of ecosystem is maintain the release schedule. That's a service that might be outsourced to the PMO or supported by the PMO, and we're going to look at how that might break down in the service catalogue. But this is the service catalogue, as I say, is your menu. So what do we want on that menu? What do we want people to be able to see and understand about the service? Well, first of all, some description of the service is useful and what that service provides. We'll talk a little bit about why the service is being offered, because that obviously often helps people to understand when they might use it as well. Why are we offering this service? And also, it's a sort of a cue to us. Is that still valid when we come to review services? We were providing it for this reason. Does that still stack as a reason? Do we need to retire that service? Do we need to think differently about how we supply it? We need to think about how the PMO will apply this service. So a sort of quick sort of overview of what the PMO will do in order to deliver this service and how the PMO is going to measure the value of this service. As I say, one of the key things that a service-based approach gives us is this ability to measure the value. So we need to talk about what those metrics are going to be, how we're going to measure it. We're going to include some criteria for when the PMO will deliver this service. So entry criteria to the service, when might we provide this, to whom could we provide this, who are the candidates, and what are the situations in which we might provide this service. And we're going to provide some helpful hints. If you're thinking of providing this service, you might want to consider doing this, or you might want to consider doing that. Think about these things. We also want to include, if we're thinking about services and we're defining services, particularly if we're thinking down the roadmap, these are services we want to bring on board, what are the PMO capabilities we need to fulfill this service? What are the skills and competencies we need within the PMO if we're to deliver this service? And do we have them, or do we need to recruit them in or train up on them? That will be a key sort of thing that we need to consider particularly when launching a new service. And a bit like the old Amazon customers who bought this were also interested in this. What are the related services? If we're providing this service, did you know we could also do this for you? And as we do this, don't forget the output of this service will act as an input to this other service. So make sure we're linked up, joined up in our thinking. So that's a very quick overview of what the service catalogue entry must contain, what should contain, and what it looks like. Let's have a quick look then at how that might play out in the real world. So I want you to imagine I'm putting together my service catalogue. We've identified this need, or somebody's come up with the idea that we could to provide to the product manager a service whereby we maintain the release schedule on their behalf. So this is what the service catalog entry might look like for that. So it's this, you have the service description. So we're going to maintain a release or product schedule on behalf of the project program or portfolio manager.
What that provides is a list of what products or functionality will be available at what time. So that's what a release schedule gives us, but that's what we're providing to the customer. Why are we providing it? Well, we're maintaining this on behalf of the product owner, and that allows them to focus on other things. So obviously, a lot of the time when we're thinking about what the PMO can do, we're doing it when actually the PMO doing it relieves pressure in other areas, or whether it's better value for the PMO to do it to allow other roles to focus on other aspects of their job. So in this case, we're taking that on behalf of the product owner to allow them to focus perhaps on product delivery. Now we're going to talk about how the PMO will apply this service. So this is just a very quick overview of what the PMO is going to do. So we're going to speak to the project program managers to understand their delivery schedules, collate that information together and provide an expected timeline. And then the release schedule or product roadmap will be shared with the portfolio manager or product owner. So a very simple overview of what the steps are for delivering this service. And this is customer facing, don't forget. So this is what we're going to put in front of the customer to say, this is how we're going to do it. It's not intended to be a blow by blow sort of step by step instructions on how the service will be delivered. But we do have just that document. I'm going to introduce you very quickly to another document because it's one thing having something on the menu, but your chefs in the kitchen don't work off the menu, they're going to work off a recipe. So this is our menu, this is customer facing, but back in the kitchen, in the PMO, we're going to have an internal document that actually tells us in detail how we're going to apply this service. And that's like your recipe book. And that's the PMO operations handbook. I'm not going to go into that in great detail in this session, but just to say, don't forget you've got your service catalogue, which is customer facing, but you're going to want to have another document that goes into the real detail of how we're going to measure, deliver, and apply this service. And that's going to be your PMO operations handbook. So that's going to sit in the kitchen with you. It's not customer facing, but it's for internal consumption. We're going to talk about how the PMO will measure the values. So in this case, the service can be measured by seeing how many people provide positive feedback on the release schedule, have said that they found that useful, want us to continue to provide it. Looking at the criteria for this particular service, we might provide that when the PMO is working in a product-based agile environment. So if we're not working in a product-based agile environment, maybe this isn't a service we need to consider. Or if we're thinking about moving to a product-based agile environment, that's great. That's telling us that this is aligned to our overall corporate strategy and roadmap. So this is a good service we could be providing. And when we're supporting a product manager. So in both those cases, this would be a good time to offer this offer this service. A couple of helpful hints, as I say, so if you're doing this, consider using a common tool to make gathering the information easier and more timely, and speak to the individuals to provide the data to explain why it's being collated, and maybe offer them access to that collated report so they can see how that information is being used, what assistance it provides. So a couple of things to think about when we're providing that service. And then finally, on the right-hand side here, we've got the capabilities we need. So the competencies, we need somebody who's competent in planning and scheduling, somebody who has an understanding of reporting, insights and analysis, relationships and engagement, teamwork, resourcefulness. These are all competencies, PMO-based competencies that will come to the light, that we can refine, that we can hone through the provision of this service. And it's worth saying here as well, you can find out a lot more about competencies on those essentials courses, on the essentials for PMO admins and the PMO analyst courses. We talk a great deal about the competencies, how they apply and how we can refine them and build on them through the provision of services to our organisations. And a couple of some generic tools, understanding of component milestones, perhaps having a scheduling tool that we can use to pull this information together, to draw it all together. And related services, so these are other services that will have their own service catalogue entries. So we might have a service where we review progress on agile deliveries, or we might have a service where we develop and maintain schedules for the portfolio program or project managers. We might have a service where we look at the business strategy and roadmap and maintain the business strategy and roadmap. So those services would absolutely relate to this, and they may feed into and off of one another. So we just have a link to those services there to remind us that these are services that might also be of interest to the customer, but also that we need to consider when delivering this service. So that's an example of what the service catalog entry for a given service may look like. In this case, the maintaining a release schedule, but those headings can stay the same, and you can um, populate them according to the service you want to provide. But for each service, you're going to have those headings, and think about how we're defining this service. What does our menu look like? Our menu item look like for this service? So that's the service catalog and an entry within the service catalog. I want to talk a little bit about making that transition. So if you're thinking of moving from a support-based PMO to a service-based PMO, I just want you to consider a few of these things. First of all, I think it's important to have a plan. So it's not just we talk a lot on the courses about we need to promote and champion project program portfolio management techniques. So let's take a leaf out of that book and actually have a plan for delivering. So not just launch the service, but think about how we're going to launch the service, when we're going to launch the service, what needs to be in place, what are the activities, what are the deliverables, what are the milestones as we transition from a support-based PMO to a service PMO. What are the key sort of phases of activity, the key milestones, the big drops where we go, right, we're now in this mode, we're now in this phase as we move on that journey. So have a plan. Don't just sort of wake up tomorrow and go, right, we're going to be service-based today. Let's have a plan for how we're going to get there. And that gives time as well to bring others along on the journey. And that relates very keenly to the next point, ensure you have buy-in. As I said, it's not always desirable to have a service-based PMO. It might be something that we desire to work in that sort of mature environment, but maybe maybe the organisation around us isn't ready for that yet, or doesn't want it. Maybe they just want to come in and ask you to knock up a sandwich each day. And again, there's nothing wrong at all with that. So if you are going to make that move, speak to your stakeholders, speak to your customers, make sure that you have that support, make sure that they support the approach. If they're used to a support-based environment, they might not like the idea of what I can't just come in and ask what I want anymore. I have to order off this menu. I'm not sure I like that. But we need to be able to articulate the benefits of doing that. These things around being able to align to the strategy, being able to get those value metrics, be able to mature how we do delivery, get that consistency, that predictability in the services we offer. And that's what we need to talk about always when you're selling something. Let's talk to the benefits. So make sure you have that buy-in and you'll find the road a lot smoother. I think in my experience, it's useful as well to start small and build from there. It doesn't necessarily work to flip completely from a support-based to a service-based environment, but to introduce those services one by one, maybe pilot the approach with a couple of services for a couple of projects. That will increase buy-in too. When people see that, oh, I'm getting this consistent approach, I understand exactly what's happening, we're able to measure the value. And it might take time. By doing it in this sort of gently approach, by introducing services gradually, people get to see the value rather than throwing them big bang style into the water and seeing how we get on. Let's sell the value as we go and introduce those services one by one. That will help with the buy-in, but also help you in the transition rather than switching, because it is quite a mind shift. So doing it gradually can be a really good way of doing it. It's all very well, and I've done this and have been tempted to do it as well, to sit down and go, I know what will be a great idea. I know what a good menu looks like. I know the things we should be providing. But experience tells me, no matter what I think the best things are, the best services my PMO can be provided, I need to be led by my customers' demand. So don't just create a menu. Don't just sit in a room and create and go, these are the things I think we should be doing. Curate the menu. Speak to your customers, talk to your stakeholders, find out what it is they actually want. What are the services that you really value from us? What are the services you want to see us providing? What are the things perhaps that we don't do or that you don't know that we can do? Have that conversation, have that interaction. I think that's much better than just going, here's a list of things that I think you need, and you can only order off from here from now on. Let's curate that menu with our customers, find out where the demand is, find out what they want. And then how best to provide it. How are we going to do that? How are we going to make this really land with you? So don't just create the menu, curate it with your customers, curate it with them in mind, find out what the demand actually is. And the other benefit to doing that is you'll waste less of your time. I have spent time defining services, thinking about them, going, this will be brilliant, only to find it absolutely falling on deaf ears. And it just withers on the vine because no one's interested in taking up that service. No matter how much I see the value of it, no matter how much I think it's a good idea, if the customers aren't demanding it, it's not going to get used. And finally, manage the change. As you know, we're change-based people. We work in change organizations. That's what projects, programs, and portfolios are all about. It's about introducing and managing change. So let's make sure that when and this applies to PMO services as well, when we're introducing them, it's a change. So manage it as a change. All of the PMO stakeholders will be affected. So let's follow those principles of organizational change management. Don't just inflict it on them, but bring them on that journey. Think about what the internal as well as the external. So not just the customers, but what about our people within the PMO? Do they need support? Do they need training? Do they need communicating to, as well as our external stakeholders who are going to receive communications about it, but perhaps they need some bringing along on the journey, talking about how this is going to work. So do treat it as a change piece, right down to the leveraging of the benefits of it. Let's talk about the benefits. Let's remind people all the time why we're doing this and how successful it's been, how it's going, what are the changes we're making. Maybe it didn't land brilliantly, but here's how we're adjusting that. Here's how we're making those changes in the future, so we can maintain that ongoing support for the change. So those are some things just to be thinking about. If you're thinking of making this transition from a support-based environment to a service-based environment, think about those things, and that will help deliver the change. So that's what you need to think about when you're making the transition. But as you're making it, you might like a bit of support. Well, good news, folks. We have a few ideas for how we can support that transition. And of course, the first thing to think about is the Essentials for PMO courses. Get your people on the Essentials for PMO Administrators and PMO Analysts course. We talk in great detail about this on those courses, and it's a really good grounding for understanding how a service is put together, how multiple services are put within the PMO are put together, how we think about how we engage with our customers. So train your teams to be service PMO superstars and train them ideally through that Essentials for PMO. Those two Essentials for PMO courses are a really good place to start in getting your people up to speed. And if you're not familiar, go and do this yourself. I'm not just saying train your people, go do it yourself. It's a great course. They're really interesting, interactive and engaging. So do consider going on those courses, and that will help you understand the service-based approach and different services. We sort of pick the services apart and think about how they apply. The next thing I want you to think about, if you need support during the transition, is the PMO Service Catalogue. It's a book. It's this book here. As you can see, it's quite large. My screen's not blurring it too much. When I put together that maintain a release schedule service catalogue entry, I didn't sit here drumming my fingers on the desk or on my head and trying to think what should be in it, because I have a copy of the PMO Service Catalogue. It's basically all the service catalogue entries you could ever want to introduce into your PMO. So it's basically, you can go through there and cherry pick, I want that service, I want that service, I want that service. And it's written out those service catalogue entries for you already. So it's like having all the answers to the exam paper. You've got the exams. Don't waste your time thinking about, oh, what should the service description for this be? It's there, it's in that book. So, and the good news is, if you join the PMO analyst course, we'll send you a copy. So it's a really useful document. So when you're constructing your PMO and thinking about what are the services, get a copy of this, and it's got all the services in there that you can need, and it's laid them all out for you. So it's a huge time saver, and it might also give you ideas for other services you hadn't considered. Oh, actually, while we're here, we could do that. So have a look through that. It's really good. And finally, it would be ridiculous for me not to promote my own services, which is we deliver through the Everyday Project Manager. We offer a fractional PMO service through the Everyday Project Manager. So we have our own PMO service offering where we will come and, depending on what you want, we'll come and help you set up a PMO in your organisation. We'll run elements of it for you. Perhaps you don't want to run all the services in your PMO yourself. Perhaps you're bored of doing the reporting every week and you want to focus on some of the other more interesting services. give that stuff to us. We'll go and do that for you. And we work on a service-based approach. We'll run certain services for you while you can do other things, or we'll run all your services for you if you like. But do contact me to discuss if that's of interest to you, using our fractional PMO service to take some of that that challenge on for you. Do give us a shout. That's it from me. That's all I've got to say. I'd like to see you all soon. I'm going to pop up in a few places over the next few days and weeks. I'm going to be at the PMO House of PMO conference. I'm there next Thursday, but it's a 3-day event. We've got PMO Learn on the Wednesday, the conference itself on the Thursday, the 10th anniversary. It's going to be amazingly exciting. And then there's the Impact Engine on the Friday. I'm going to be there on the Thursday, so do pop along and say hello to me if you're there. For a bit of fun, if you do see me, use the code word bananas, and I'll know that you've seen me on this webinar. That'll be fun, won't it? I'll see you also on the Essentials course. If you do become the Essentials courses, that is a course that, as an associate trainer, I do run on behalf of PMO Learning, or do train on behalf of PMO Learning rather. So if you book onto one of those courses, you may see me there. I'm also on LinkedIn, so do please feel free to connect or follow with me there, or on one of the courses that the Everyday Project Manager offers. We do practical project management training courses, so do feel free to pop along to those. If PMO is your bag, absolutely PMO Learning is the way to go. But if you want to think about what your project management teams are going, do give us a shout, because we run practical project management training to give people the skills they need to actually deliver projects really nicely. And if you think that's something some people in your organisation could do give me a shout. And on our website, you'll find loads more information. It's everydaypm.co.uk, and there's information on there about our courses, but also you can book a chat with me there, and we can see where we go from there. But that's it from me. As I say, hopefully I'll see a number of you at the PMO conference. As I say the word bananas, I'll know you've met me here. And that's it. Yeah, it's been really lovely speaking to you. I hope you found that useful. I hope you found it interesting. And I hope I'll see you again.